Well, here we are. We've waited almost 4 years for this game to release, and we can finally play it. And I'm gonna be honest, there's a lot about this game that makes this a mixed bag for me. For starters, you can tell that this is an Ubisoft game, with all of the different game mechanics that have been ripped directly from other Ubisoft titles like Assassin's Creed. We're going to talk about all the different things that really irked me about this game when I started playing it, and I'm going to give you my spoiler-free thoughts, and I will use spoiler-free footage, so if you're looking to try out the game, I won't ruin anything for you. But before we do this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of my videos, and if you enjoy this video, don't forget to check out my next live stream where I'll be playing this game and talking about it in more detail. But without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the morality system, and basically how the overall game functions. So instead of games like Jedi Survivor, Star Wars Outlaws has you playing as somebody that can either be a good person or a bad person. There's really no middle ground. They do this through a morality system, and this is determined through players' actions. It's basically what Dying Light 2 tried to do, but they failed miserably. So far, I think the morality system they've implemented into the game has done a really good job. You have 3 different factions that you can either choose to support or you can screw them over. And the outcome can progress your status with one faction, and you can get a bigger payday out of them as well. Which, like I said, I think it's done really well, and I believe that this is how a faction morality system should be done. But here's the problem. You can side with different factions, but there's really no consequences for doing so. You might not be able to go into certain areas, or a certain group will probably try to target you if you do go into those areas, but besides that, there's really nothing there. I mean, it's done correctly, but not to the extent that I would have preferred myself. And I've just played a ton of games that have tried to do this morality system, and for some reason, they never can really get it right. But this is one of the things that I noticed and thought I should point out. So now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of things. One of the things I mentioned earlier is that you can tell that this was made by Ubisoft just because of the movement system in the game is extremely similar to Assassin's Creed. And my first thought when I played this and I had to start scaling sides of buildings was, really? They really couldn't help themselves. They should have just called this game Assassin's Creed Outlaws, because so far 75% of the game is climbing from ledge to ledge, and the other 25% is stealth-based combat, where most of the missions focuses around you making sure you don't get caught, which again is similar to Assassin's Creed. And again, it made me a little disappointed that they did not attempt to do something at least slightly different from their normal games, but then again, it's Ubisoft, and my only compliment towards this system is that it's very fluid and easy to do. This also provides multiple different ways to take on encounters, but unfortunately this also makes the combat encounters extremely repetitive, because there are just so many there aren't that many ways that you can take on groups of enemies unless you go guns blazing or stealth. There is no real punishment for doing this, and I just thought it was extremely overlooked by the developers. The next criticism I have, and it might seem small, but it can be fixed through an update, but for some reason when you grapple, you don't have the option to climb up the grappling rope, and in case you overshoot your target or you're in a rush trying to escape from enemies, you'll miss, and there's no other option but to fall into the abyss. And I think that's something that they should correct, because it's just so silly not to have the option to climb up a grappling rope. But that's all I really have to say about the combat and the movement. Let's talk a little bit about the open world map. So for starters, this game was marketed as the first open world Star Wars game coming from Ubisoft, and when I saw that, I knew that this game was going to have to do a lot to avoid the same mistakes that Assassin's Creed Valhalla made, especially when in Valhalla there was just a ton of extra space throughout the map and nothing filled in between. So you could just ride or row for 20 minutes worth of the map and there would just be nothing to do. And this game has different things that you can do while riding to multiple destinations, and some surprise enemy encounters along the way. And if you want to raid an Imperial camp, you can do that. And if you want to raid a Bandit camp for gun parts, you can do that too. And this map is pretty big. I haven't had the chance to explore every nook and cranny, because the game does kind of throw a lot in your face, and it makes it difficult to do things unless you prioritize in what you want to do in a list or something. And that's something that might confuse people or overwhelm them. But like I said before, you might want to list out everything you do just so you know what is more important. The next problem is how basic this open world is, though. If you enjoyed games like Red Dead and Skyrim, you're definitely going to hate this game. I mean, you have your main areas, but in between, I mean, there's just basic bandit camps and different shops you can get to, but nothing really worth mentioning besides for the enemy encounters I mentioned earlier. I would definitely say if you're looking to get this game, I would keep that in mind. Like, this game is good for what you're getting, at least. Like, if you're gonna get it in a bargain bin, which I highly recommend you do, you know, you better wait till this game's like 75% off before buying it. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about are the graphics, and God, this is something that I've noticed a lot with Ubisoft games, but the graphics in this game just feel so dated, and even though some of the areas are very exciting and full of life, it gets old after a while. For example, most of your quests or jobs come from this alien named Dana, and the little bar that she's in, you know, is supposed to feel like it's full of life and there's just so much going on, but it's just so boring. It just looks bad too. It just looks so old. Like, the lighting textures are just so dry and the color palette is just so dated, and it just has the same problem that Starfield has, where the graphics are something that would have looked cool back in 2018, but we're in 2024 going on 2025, and at this point, Ubisoft is falling into the same trap that Bethesda's gotten into with their games, all running on the same engine that they've been on since the Xbox One era, and I just think it's time for them to make some graphical improvements with their games. I've also noticed a ton of glitches, whether it be screen tearing or just falling straight through the fucking map. I don't have any footage of falling through the map because it catches me by surprise, but I have this clip of a character's head stretching across the screen, and I'm just surprised that these issues were not picked up during playtesting. And I mean, besides all that, the game just doesn't look very good. I think I've fallen asleep a couple of times since starting this game, and if that doesn't say much, this next part is gonna say a lot more. So this is gonna be the most important part of the video, because this is gonna be the deciding factor in whether or not you end up buying the game or not. Most people, when they play a Star Wars game, they're expecting at least a very heavy story-driven game, unless it's multiplayer like Battlefront, but this game's story starts off great, but in my opinion, it gets weaker and weaker the more you play it. It starts off with a very cool premise, but I feel like it just gets bogged down through the typical Ubisoft shit they put in their games, and by the end, you're just honestly so tired of the idea. The main character is so boring, and she's such a generic Star Wars criminal that you would see in movies, but you'd think that she would have some kind of redeeming qualities, but nope, she basically stays the same throughout the entire game. And this game is one of those games that if you don't mind putting in the time or the effort, you might enjoy it, but if you want to race through it just for the story, you're gonna be disappointed, because she just does not have anything interesting about her character. The only thing I found somewhat entertaining was her little sidekick Nyx, or Vix, I can't even remember, who can distract enemies by doing this little play dead thing, and the enemy reacts to it like, "Oh, what the hell is that?" I thought this was kind of funny, because I don't even know what the hell it is. It seems like some kind of dog, squid, something, or something, I don't know, shit. But besides that, many Star Wars fans are gonna hate Kay, because she's just not a relatable character, nor does she have a monocle of redemption in the game. And I've noticed a lot of people online comparing her to the Rey of the Star Wars franchise, and I just 100% agree with that. She's just kind of there, and we're stuck with her. But Now I've got two more things I want to talk about before I wrap this video up. One of the things I want to talk about is the space travel, and I hate to make this comparison, but the space travel in this game is exactly like Starfield. Like, almost exactly like Starfield. A little suspicious if you ask me, but besides that, you get to go planet to planet or from planet to ship, and you have your typical random enemy encounters in the spaceship, but that's about it. I mean, you can kind of go to different areas in space, but it's extremely boring, and it's probably more boring than Starfield was, and that's a hard task because Starfield space travel was fucking terrible, and it was one of the main criticisms that people had while playing it. The other thing I wasn't a huge fan of was Dana's side mission setup. Talk about a game being super dated. Dana has the same menu loadout as if you were picking a side mission from a request board in Far Cry 3, and that game is over 10 years old. That's what I mean about so many reused ideas from their older titles. It just, I don't know, I feel like Ubisoft just does not deserve to make another Star Wars game after this. That's just my opinion, though. My last thoughts about this game. So far, this game has not been reviewed well at all. It's getting a 7 out of 10 from IGN, a 7 out of 10 from Metacritic, and a 6 out of 10 from GameSpot, and that's pretty much what people predicted. I find it funny that the people who paid $110 for this game are feeling the burn of poor performance way more than those who paid the normal $70 for the game. Let's just have a moment of silence for all those poor souls that paid that $110. Okay, I'm honestly extremely disappointed, and I hate to say this, but maybe EA is better off with the license to the game, because they seem to know exactly what to do with it and how to make it a good experience. Ubisoft just has a bad reputation for copy and pasting a lot of their content in their games. Maybe this will influence what they do in the future with Assassin's Creed, or they haven't learned their lessons at all and they'll continue to make these kinds of mistakes. Who knows? But I'm just going to give you my honest rating for this game, and I personally am going to give it a 6 out of 10 on the moist meter. Not the moist meter, but on the dead ox meter, it's going to get a 6 out of 10. Just because even though some parts of the game are somewhat entertaining, there are still a lot of moments that feel uninspired, completely ripped out of other franchises like Starfield and Assassin's Creed, and it's just not in a good way. You know, this is definitely one of those games that you should get if it's on sale, but besides that, don't pay the ridiculous price that they're asking for this game. It's like those poor souls that are going to pay the $100 for Assassin's Creed, or not Mirage, what's that new one? I don't know, the new Assassin's Creed game that's coming out this year. But that's going to do it for me. I just want to thank you all for watching, and have a good night.